Bloomingdale School District 13. I'm very pleased to see you here with us. This is a very important change that we are doing at the elementary level with eyes towards making adjustments at the middle school level in time. Standards-based grading and reporting is a significant change from the way we typically assess our student performances. And rather than focus on a letter grade that shows you what a student has attained or earned, we're trying to give you a measure as to how they are growing each and every year in our system. And standards-based grading and reporting gives us that opportunity. But you don't have to take my word for it. We brought in someone today who is an expert in this area. She has worked in public schools for over 15 years, most recently as an instructional coach. Lisa Westman has been involved in helping our staff better understand the rigors of standards-based grading and reporting so that we're implementing it with integrity for the first time. Lisa is also a prolific writer and blogger. Her pieces have appeared in Education Week and Utopia and many other places, but she recently published a book that unfortunately I left over there on the stage. Student-based differentiation is a wonderful book that helps teachers have additional tools available to them. That book is actually coming to me as I speak. Here it is, Student-Driven Differentiation. You can find this book available on Amazon at your convenience, but Lisa Westman is very good at putting together tools that make teachers better able to do their work and better able to address the needs of all students. And without further ado, it's my great pleasure to share with you tonight, Lisa Westman.
Thank you, Paula, for coming tonight. There's a football game on. I think it's at 7 o'clock, so I'll try and get you out of here as close as possible and see all of the game. As Dr. Bartelt said, I am Lisa Westman, and I am an educator and writer and speaker. But more importantly, I am a mother and a wife. And this is my family. That's my husband, Keith, our son, Keller, who is in 7th grade, our daughter, Mallory, who is in 4th grade, and our dog, Darcy. And I like to put her by herself because she's my favorite. If my kids are listening to the live stream, they're going to be really upset with me. But Darcy never talks back, so you know, she gets special billing. Why do I start with them, aside from understanding a lot of what you all feel as parents? They are really the impetus for how I started to write and speak. So I'll tell you one story. I like to tell stories, but I'm going to tell one about how I got here. So this is my son Keller when he was about 2 and making a mess, getting into trouble, and he was born like that. In fact, the day he was born, I sent him to the nursery in the hospital, Lutheran General Hospital. That's what everyone said to do. The baby's born, send him there to sleep at night. He'll get a few hours. The nurse will bring the baby back when he needs to eat. Send him to the nursery. 30 minutes later, I hear the cart in the hallway, and it sounds like it's coming closer to my room. And then all of a sudden, the nurse is back in my room with my baby. And I say, oh no, I just fed him. He doesn't need to eat again. She said, oh, I know, but he's crying so loudly. He's keeping all of the other babies up. He can't stay in the nursery. I'm like, oh great, he already got kicked out of his first classroom setting. And it stayed like that. Keller had a lot of trouble in school because he didn't fit the mold. And maybe some of you have a son or daughter who doesn't fit the mold either. I was a teacher. I never really questioned what we did in school because I grew up, I went to school, it worked for me, I was a good student, I liked school. But when I had a child who struggled, I started to study a little bit more, and then I started to write about it, just for my own blog. Eventually, my blog was picked up by Edweek, I wrote for Edweek, and then I wrote a book. But really, I'm just a mom and a teacher. And so that brings me to why are we all here tonight? We're making a change, a pretty significant change in Bloomingdale 13 and in many districts across Illinois and the country to better report out on how students learn, and more importantly, better communicate to students what it is that they're learning and how they are progressing. To parents, however, it feels very foreign because, like I said, we all went to school and it worked just fine for us. So you may have seen Incredibles 2. If you have a son or daughter who likes that, I'm going to show you about 13 seconds from that movie right now.
That's not the way you're supposed to do it, Dad. They want us to do it.
I don't know that way. Why would they change that? That is that.
Done properly.
Why are they doing that? Right? I still feel like this when my daughter comes home with her fourth grade math. I do not know how to help her, and then she gets really mad at me. So there are lots of changes. I'm sure there's great reasons for the math changes. I'm only talking about standards-based grading changes. Why are we making this change? In order for me to really explain why, we're going to have to go a little bit back into history. What I can tell you is one of the reasons we study history is because we learn from it. And as Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. And we know better now. So let's go back to 1850. 1850 was roughly the first year that there were grades in the United States. Prior to that, students went to school and they came home and there was no reporting. A lot of students didn't go to school at all. They worked on farms. And as factories started to grow and the Industrial Revolution took place, more and more students were going to school, and there needed to be a quick and efficient way for schools to report out on how the students were doing so the parents knew. And so the idea of A, B, C, D, and F came into place. If you think of grade A meat, that's where A came from, the best. And it was very easy to give those grades if you said right, wrong, yes, no, and then out of a certain amount, you averaged those numbers, and 90 became an A, 90 to 100. And that stuck for a long time without anybody ever really questioning whether or not that was the best way to report out. We just did it. But it isn't the best way. So I'm going to have you all think for a second about your own children. We're talking about history, and we're not going to go back as far as 1850, but think about your own children and when they were born and their milestones. So think about how old they were when they started to crawl and walk and talk. If we were to go around the room, my guess would be there would be very, very few people who would say their children all walked or talked on the exact same day. Yet in school, that's exactly what we say. You're going to learn this by Friday. We have deadlines for when children start school. So if you're born between September 1st and August 31st of any given year, you're going to go to kindergarten together. We don't look back and say this child's only been walking for this long or talking for this long. We put all of those students together and then expect them to meet all of those learning milestones on the same day using the traditional system. It doesn't really make a lot of sense when you think about it that way. So what do? We switch to standards-based grading. So I'll just warn you, I have 2 text-heavy slides right now, and that's it. And all of these slides are available to you as well as the streaming, so if you don't get this all in now, I'm going to have you read these. I won't read to you, but first question, what is standards-based grading? So just like walking and talking, if those were the clearly defined objectives, we would be able to say where children are on a continuum. Are they almost walking? Are they fully walking? What does walking look like? That's what we're doing with learning. We are clearly defining those objectives and communicating as clearly as we can and as frequently as we can where your children are at to reach all of those learning milestones. What does the research say about standards-based grading? Again, last slide that you're going to have to read. It's never fun to read a lot of text, especially about a topic that's brand new. So to better illustrate this concept to you, I'm going to show you a video. We're going to set the video up for you. Let's pretend that we have a learning standard. All children will jump into the deep end of a pool unassisted. All children will jump into a pool, the deep end of a pool, unassisted. You meet that standard when you jump in the deep end unassisted. When you are somewhere along the lines, you're approaching that standard. So take a look at these children jumping into a pool.
Go, ready, go! Yay!
Who is approaching the standard in that? Why?
She did it by herself, the other ones were together, holding hands.
Okay, holding hands. So the last girl's approaching. Did she have something on her arm?
Yes.
Water. So is that unassisted? Or is it assisted? It's assisted. So all of those children were technically approaching the standard if they have to jump in unassisted. So if we watch again.
Go, ready, go! Yay!
The kids let go of their hands and jumped into the pool. When we would report out on that, we would say they've met the standard. When you're assisted and you're wearing something, you're approaching the standard. What we do in schools is we formatively assess students. So that was, let's say, the 50th time that day that those students had jumped into the pool. Over time, we assess our students with little quick tests like this to see where they are in meeting a standard. And when the preponderance of data shows that they are meeting it, we say your child has met this standard and we move on and we extend learning for them. It can be argued that some standards you master at some point and then you regress a little and you try again. And that's really how learning goes. There's no such thing in anything as pure mastery, which we're going to talk about a little bit in a second. Bloomingdale 13 has created 15 principles that guide how they will implement and how they are currently implementing and learning about standards-based grading. I believe that there are copies available of this graphic for everybody. At some point.
We can make them available in the school office.
And they can be available in the school office, and there are also digital copies available in a link, and I'll share a link and a QR code at the end. I'm not going to go through all of these now, but this basically lays out for you all of the foundational pieces of standards-based grading. The main focus is when we report out on how a student is doing, we are reporting out on that standard only. We are not conflicting that information with other pieces like behavior or coming prepared to class, which is not to say that those things are unimportant. They are very important. And we will share information about that as well, but it will not be incorporated into a grade. So if you think of, you might have gotten an A in reading when you were growing up. I used to get an A in math because I would bring in extra boxes of Kleenex, and totally true, for extra credit, because I was not so good at math. But if you looked at my report card, it said that I was. On report cards with standards-based grading, you're getting it's pure an idea on how students are progressing on each individual standard, like walking, like talking, just like those milestones. But this is still a shift for all of us. It's more of an identity shift than a shift or any conflict for our children. So I wrote a blog post a couple years back. This was the picture that I put with it. The title of the article is Standards-Based Grading Made My Kid Average. And I wrote that article because my sister, who lives 5 minutes from me, had 3 girls in the school district that had gone to standards-based grading, one of the first in Illinois, and she called me after the first report card. She was very upset because her daughter went from having all A's to just meeting all of the standards, and she was just average now. And she used to be an A student, and now she was average. And I explained to my sister that is not at all what all means means. That means your child, my nieces, had met all of these learning criteria for the year. But it was still difficult for my sister, and she had a lot of questions. Like these questions, which some of you may have asked yourself from time to time. So I'll give you a second to look at these commonly asked questions. I'm going to talk a little bit about the overarching topics or themes of these questions in an effort to answer them. And then I will give all of you time at the end to ask additional questions should you have them. The first piece is motivation. Why or how will my child be motivated to do well if it doesn't count if they turn in their homework, if they can't get an A? Why are they going to put forth any effort? So what I'll tell you is that statement presupposes that all children are motivated by A's or motivated by, just their teacher sending them homework to do it. And so I'm going to show you what a typical classroom in a traditional grading system might look like.
This is not funny. All right, let's settle down. I've graded your test, and I have to say, I am more than a little bit disappointed. In fact, I've decided I'm going to throw them all out.
All right! Man.
I got a question. Who came up with that name? Europe.
I think we've done enough today. Let's recline with it. For the rest of the period, just everybody, read at your desk.
So being motivated by grades is a learned behavior. We are not born being motivated by anything outside of what's naturally in us. We are taught that when we go to school, we are rewarded for either being compliant or for being ready for the test on the day that it's assigned. In a standards-based classroom, the true principles of motivation, intrinsic motivation, are built in. So this comes from the work of Daniel Pink. This is in his book, Drive. There are 3 pieces that are necessary for humans, not just children, all humans to be motivated. So autonomy, the ability to have some say in what you're doing, mastery, truly mastering skills, and a purpose. That desire, why are we learning this? The relevancy. In standards-based grading, those are all of the founding principles. Students not only are told which standards they are working to achieve, to master, but they are shown and taught how that is relevant and worthwhile for them and how it will influence their lives. Because everyone isn't necessarily given that test on the same day to get that A and that's it, you get a 90, 70, 60, we're moving on. Students set learning goals within each standard and are able to progress at their own rate. When a student masters a skill, they are given an extension or enrichment, so they are not sitting and waiting for everybody else. Students' needs are met the way that they need to be met, not just by what days we say we're going to give something or the lesson that's at hand that day. And I know that this all sounds foreign, probably, And to be honest, it's new to all teachers too, and it's a work in progress. This school district in particular is working diligently to ensure that all of these things that we're saying happen with fidelity and they're as authentic as possible. The second piece, communication. How are you going to know how your students are doing if you don't get a report card that says A, B, C, D, F? Report cards are one of the most obsolete documents left in our country. They are a holdover from 1850, when we did not have the internet, when we did not have telephones. We had to communicate a couple times a year. We sent out a very simple piece of paper with some information on it. I encourage you to think of report cards as bank statements. You may still get a bank statement in the mail from your bank, but it is likely that you have either an app for your bank or a login, and at any point, you can log onto your bank account and see what funds you have, what you've spent, what you've deposited. You can even get data like, I spend this much money at restaurants and this much money on bills, and all of that information at any given point. By the time a stamp is put on a report card or a bank statement, that information is already obsolete. It's already updated and you can see that. The same goes for grades. At any point you can log on. Now you might be thinking to yourself, I have a big login, but I never look at it. Same thing for online grades, except if you overdraw your bank account, and I'm not saying I know this from personal experience, but I've heard, the bank will let you know. They'll text you, they'll call you, you'll get 14 emails, you'll get a lot of notification that you've overdrawn your account. If your children are not progressing toward a standard, your teachers will communicate with you via email or a phone call or a note home or ask to meet you in person. We don't need to wait for the next report card to come out to see that something is not working. We are going to communicate, and we are going to communicate much more thoroughly. Because feedback is the new grades. This is my plan, orange is the new black. Feedback is the new grades, if anyone watches that. Feedback both to you, from your children's teachers, and also from your children. So when your children come home, they will be able to tell you where they are progressing along that standard. The teacher will be able to tell you, and you will also be able to use the online system to see at any point. Your children will have learning goals, will be able to state their goals. It will be very different than, what are you doing in school? Nothing. I mean, that might happen once in a while, but you know what I mean. The next big topic is the real world. There are no retakes in real life. Why are schools doing retakes? First of all, there are retakes in real life. I actually cannot think of any situation that there is not a retake for. These are tests that offer retakes. This is Gabrielle Dahlman. She was an Olympic skater for Canada. She fell 6 times in her solo performance at the most recent Olympics. She's still skating, still a professional skater. She wasn't fired, she wasn't picked off the team. And no one would say that she hasn't mastered skating, she had a bad day. Retakes are offered for children when they have a bad day, not because they didn't study for the test. Because with standards-based grading, we are giving students tests when we know that they are ready. That's what that formative assessment data tells us. Those children who jumped into the pool, if they weren't even able to go into the shallow end, they wouldn't have been asked to jump into the deep end. If a child is not ready for a big test, that teacher will spend some additional time with them, also be communicating with you to get them ready. If everything shows that that child was ready, yet they had a bad day, that's when they get the retake. That's what retakes are. Moving forward, when we think about what's going to happen if our children go to high school or private school or a college that doesn't practice standards-based grading. Let's start with colleges. They're moving quicker than most high schools. And I included in the link I'm going to share 4 or 5 articles that you could read about college acceptance with standards-based grading. Colleges are a business. They need to accept students. They have systems in place to review transcripts from all different types of high schools. Standards-based, traditional grades, no grades. College is not an issue. I can tell you that the vast majority of elementary schools and middle schools are moving in this direction. So high schools are being pressed from both directions, colleges and elementary schools, to also make a change. So if your high school is not there yet, they will be at some point, and if they're not, your children know what learning is about. We are setting them up to go into high school with the tools that they need and an understanding of how to set goals for themselves and take feedback and apply that and move forward. They will be able to adapt to any system that they go into. And there will be no trouble with getting into any high school or college. Makes sense? I just gave you a lot of information in a short period of time.